Welcome. This is the Intelligent Nonsense Podcast. I am the Everyday Junglist. I'm here today with a very special guest, legendary Chilean film producer Bruno Bettati. And one of the things I said in the promos to this, and my little advertisements to this is, Substack, for all its faults, all its flaws, and all its great stuff about it. One thing I really do like about it is the strange way it seems to bring people together, and the people that you meet on the platform, at least for me, have been some of the most interesting people I've met in my life, including this one right here, who I'm really pleased to have on the show. And thanks so much for joining, Bruno. And I want to start by asking how exactly you found me, and so maybe you could describe exactly. It was super random, but maybe you could. I'm not sure I got the whole story, but maybe you could just briefly say how you found me.
Thank you for your invitation and your enthusiasm. Because if it wasn't for it, I wouldn't be here. And how we met, we haven't really talked much. We've written a lot, but we haven't talked much, you and I. And I met you because one day I was watching a live from Hal Gill, another character from Substack, and he's a person that usually walks around Washington D.C. and records
Yeah.
whatever he
Yes,
sees,
yes.
and he speaks
Right.
about anything. And
Yeah, he does.
for some reason, I sent a comment, and he picked up my name, and you began asking where I was from, and I said I'm from
Right.
Italy, and
And I
then
remember
right,
how's it to be?
and then that live got cut because of Hal is very messy,
Yeah.
and walks around and suddenly the
Yes,
name
yes, yes.
cut. So look, it got cut, and I randomly wrote to you, and I said I am from Italy, or I live in Italy. And that's how we started. So it's very random. There's no actual real reason for us to be talking.
No, there's not. There's not. The interesting thing is the Italy thing was struck a chord with me because I'm trying to become an Italian citizen. I've been working on this for I think 4 years now, 5 years now, and it's very close to being there. I may actually go through. It depends on how this particular court case turns. But in any event, that was what kind of sparked me to pursue it. And then as I started talking to Bruno, I started realizing what he actually did and what his life situation was, and it was just absolutely fascinating to me. And hopefully we'll get into a lot of it. So it's impossible to cover it all because the guy is just on almost everything. But let's start. Let me just start here, Bruno, with your childhood. So your father was in Mussolini's army, correct? If I understand. So how old were your mom and dad, and when you were born, and then where were they, and what sort of happened in your early childhood there?
My father was my father is from Emilia Romagna, which is a region in the north here, and he was part of a family of Parmesan cheese makers. So I come from the food sector, and very industrial. And my father was was conscripted to the war in '44, and he had
And he
to
didn't want to
fight.
go, correct? He did not want to fight. He was not a Mussolini
No,
supporter.
in
He just
Italy,
had to go.
nobody wanted to fight, not
Yeah,
even
no,
the
no,
first.
no.
Because basically, Hitler came over here and he looked at
Yeah,
Mussolini, and he copied everything from Mussolini, and he thought he did
yeah,
it better. And so, for the Germans in general, Italy was a nuisance, was a problem, because we like to talk, and we like to eat, and we like to take 4 hours for lunchtime. It doesn't work very
yeah.
well with German. Doesn't work very
With
well
the
with German
war, right? The German,
and with the war. So,
right?
and also, we need to delve a little bit further in the history of World War II, but
I'm sure you know
uh,
some.
but basically, Mussolini had two periods before his capture, and after his capture. And so Italy went into the war reluctantly, and Germany was also reluctant to bring Italy into the war. It was a very funny relation, the axis. And so Italians in general were sent to the fronts that Italians were interested in, and that was the Balkans, Greece, Albania, and North Africa. That's basically the area that Italy fought, because Italy wanted these territories, and
Yeah,
Italy for a period had a piece of Albania and a piece of the Balkans and a piece of South Africa. Excuse me, North Africa, what today is called Eritrea.
yeah,
And so my father was sent to Albania and Greece. It was a very strange front, not exactly the most exhilarating front, because, as the Germans were spreading to the
mhm,
east. They were spreading. To the west. They first spread it to the Netherlands and Belgium, and then France, and the invasion of France, and then they wanted to hit Britain. And then, starting on 44, they began with Operation Barbarossa, and the Barbarossa started heading east towards Stalingrad. And so, this area was basically it was not really on the focus, on the radar of the Germans.
So did the Albanians and the Greeks have an army of any sort? I mean, did they have an army? I mean, what was the fighting? Was there significant fighting? Or
This part of Europe was and still is highly rural, very, very rural, majority rural, in the sense that
okay. Yeah,
Albania, Greece, and Italy basically are very decentralized countries. There's a
yeah,
lot of little villages that are six
right.
kilometers away, one from the other. It's totally different to Latin America or the US or the
Yeah,
rest of Europe. Okay. So that's how you have to picture all this area, very rural, with
yeah,
1,000 to 5,000 village people per village, which are a distance 6-10 kilometers.
right.
Italians fighting in this place, were really stranded to a certain aspect. It's
Yeah,
also
yeah,
it's also pieces of land that are bordering the water, basically, the Tyrrhenian Sea. And
yeah.
so there was a big movement of desertion. A lot of Italian soldiers deserted on the first period before Mussolini was captured,
Okay.
and the majority of the deserters took a ship and they went to Latin America, and they spread around mainly Brazil, Argentina, and Chile. Those were the main areas, and there's huge Italian colonies still there,
Yes,
particularly
yeah,
Argentina. Argentina is sort of a little Italy,
yeah, yeah.
if you
And
look
parts of
at
Brazil.
the faces on the last names. And so my
Yeah.
father went to the three countries. He disembarked in Rio, and he lived in Rio and Sao Paulo for a period. Then he moved to Buenos Aires, and he lived and worked in Buenos Aires for a period. And then he finally ended up in Chile. And my father was, besides this history of Parmesan cheese, my father was a mechanic.
Hmm.
He was a very good one. And
So you were not born yet. This is prior to your birth when he moves to Chile with
certainly,
your
otherwise
mother.
I would have
Yes,
80 years. I would
yes, he
be
was
80
right. He
years
was
old.
with your mother. So he's fairly. So when did he have you? So when did you come to the picture?
So
Like,
I came into the picture in February of 1973 in the
okay.
government of Allende in Chile.
And how old is your dad when he has you?
My father had me. My father was like Chaplin. He had a lot of children, and I was the last one. And
Okay.
he was 61 when I was born.
61 when he had you.
Yes.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing. Anyway, so your father had you at 61. And so,
Yes.
right. So what's your
So
early life like? Your early life. You're from Italy. You're Italian, but you're in Chile. Is your father proud of his Italian heritage? Is he all about
yes,
Italy? Or
yes, certainly. And as I'm telling you, the Italian colony is very strong in these countries, and in the sense that a lot of Italians moved over there. So like Chinatown or like other areas
yeah,
in Chile, you had a huge area that was very. We had a sports stadium and a second sports stadium, and also we had a football club. And we had a club for the football club where we did bingos and boccia and different sports. And on
okay.
top of that, a lot of people went over there and opened restaurants. And so there
Yeah.
was a huge Italian environment.
And was
And
there, was there any anti-Italian sentiment? Like in the U.S., you had a lot of anti-Italian immigrant sentiment. Did you have that in Chile, or did you feel that?
you mean like Little Italy, you mean?
No, like yeah, well, anti-immigrants, anti-immigrant. Oh, what are these people? All these Italians are coming over here and they're
Oh,
taking
no, you
ruining our
you
country
mean xenophobia?
in Chile.
No, no,
No,
on
okay,
the contrary. On the contrary, we were very well
okay,
received. And the Italians, we made an impact in food, and we made an impact in industry above all, in the sense that a lot of industry in Latin America was just starting, or was very early. The industrialization of the South Cone being Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay. It started no later. I mean, no earlier than the 50s. So when all this European immigration arrived, there was a huge push for the industrialization, and basically all these Italians that came over here, they all had some kind of knowledge concerning motors or
yeah, mechanical.
engines or machinery for agriculture also, which Italy is still a leader today. And so the industrialization of the car industry and the industrialization of the food industry was very linked to these Italian colonies. So all of them were immediately entrepreneurs, and
Mm.
they came before the period of service economy. and all of them had companies or something, and so
Yeah.
they integrated very quickly, and they had a very good living standard, and they were, I would say, already traumatized by the war. They were already a little bit more workaholic than
Yeah.
than
The
one.
Chileans.
Now that I live in Italy, I notice that Italians are not workaholic.
They're not real. Yeah.
No.
And then they adopted the language, obviously Spanish. So they moved from Italian to Spanish. It became Spanish speakers. Most of the Italians that moved there, or did they maintain the language, the Italian language?
My father spoke Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian.
Okay. You are a language, many multi-language speakers too. We'll get to that, but I'm going to jump ahead to your college. Okay, so we're going to jump way ahead to college here, and you studied philosophy. So why? What made you study philosophy, and what particular branch, I guess, or
It was
genre
sort
of
of
philosophy?
it was sort of a rebellion against my father, because my father was expecting for me to be an engineer and do robots and bridges and rockets, and he wanted another industrial. My father was an industrialist, and he wanted another industrialist. And I was very good at math, and I'm a polymath, so I was
Yeah.
very good in different areas. I could basically choose whatever I wanted to study. But I would probably say, first as a form of rebellion to him, and second as a form of rebellion to the Pinochet dictatorship, which I
Yeah.
basically went through the whole Chilean dictatorship. I was born before the military coup, and
Wow.
I came out of school when we finally got rid of Pinochet, more or less. And
Yeah.
so I went into university in 1990, and I decided to go for philosophy, which was a very rebellious, incomprehensible, and
Your dad was not happy. Your dad was not happy with the choice.
no, no, he
Philosophy.
was no, he was not understanding at all. He couldn't understand it.
Yeah.
I mean, my father was basically a
Yeah.
person from the countryside. He was a
Yeah.
farmer,
Yeah.
so
I understand.
so he
Yeah.
wasn't really
It's
into anything very intellectual.
intellectual. Oh yeah, this is the ultimate intellectual pursuit. So you
Uh,
graduate, and obviously did very well in philosophy. I mean, you, as a polymath, you're very, very, very intelligent, a man, extremely intelligent. You did well. You graduate, and now now you're out there. You see, well, I've got a degree in philosophy. So what am I going to do with my life? So that's the question I have. So how do you find
well,
if it's filmmaking? How do you find where do you go?
the,
Where do
the,
you go
re-
from college?
the rebellion was threefold. I wanted to go for something intellectual. Also, I wanted to leave my house as early as possible. And
Yeah,
so I began working while I was studying. And, you can tell the change of ages, because at that time I could manage to have a job. And with that job, I managed to pay the university. And also, I managed to finally move alone and move out of my house when I was very young, when I was 19. And so the job I found was working in television. And so I was working in television at the same time that I was going to the university and studying philosophy. And I could manage
this is in the 80s. This is the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. What is the time frame here?
this
Trying to give me.
91 to 95.
Let me see. Yes, I know. So that's when I'm in college as well. Okay, gotcha. So you're working in television in the '90s, early '90s. Got
Early,
it.
the first half of the 90s, before the half of the 90s that didn't have internet. Let's put it
Yes,
that
that's right. That's right. The pre-internet era. That's right. That's right. Got it. So, all
way.
right. So I'm trying to wrap my head around television at the time, but now I think I understand. But did
So
Chilean TV at the time have like the U.S. Did it have a networks? Was it networks like NBC? Mean, well, how was it structured? The television in Chile at the time.
Well, I mean, after the dictatorship, Chile was very, very connected to the American economy, and therefore we had everything the Americans had. And by that I mean we had four free TV stations, one more than the U.S. Or,
Mhm.
I mean, well, no, the same as the U.S., because U.S. had
Yeah,
PBS.
the U.S. Yeah.
We had four open air TV, and then cable arrived in '92, very early, and then home video arrived in '93, very early. First VHS and then DVD, and we had credit cards as early as 1987, so we could pretty much buy a lot of stuff from the U.S. and it would arrive with a minimum tariff, Trump's favorite word. And so, and also a lot of the content that was broadcasted in Chile was basically content produced in the United States and
Understood.
dubbed to Spanish. So
Yeah.
I am very familiarized with American pop culture. Like
Yes, he is. He is not kidding when he says that. The guy knows a font of American pop culture. I really couldn't believe it because I figured, well, this guy's not going to know anything about it. He knows everything there is to know about American pop, particularly from the time period that I'm aware of. But in any event, so what were your roles here in TV? What were you doing exactly? You say you worked in TV, but
I was
doing
working.
what?
I was working in. There is how you call it, a section of television. How do you say in English? My
Genre,
manager.
maybe maybe a genre. Is that what you're looking for? A
No,
genre
no, no,
or
no, no. I worked
no?
in what is called no. I worked in what is called programming, which is one of the main areas of a television station. And
Yeah.
programming is basically the area that doesn't do production. We buy content and we
Put
decide
it on
where
air.
to program it during the week, and we make the grid of the week with what we're going to put every Monday through Sunday at what time, and also we control the direct broadcasting progress, meaning we are the department that tells the switchman to go from this advertisement cut to this show, to this
Mhm.
broadcasting moment, to this news moment, to this weather report, to this bestseller or movie, etc. What is called continuity. So it is usually the most stressful department in a TV station, and it's basically focused on canned content. So not only was I absorbing culturally the U.S., but I was also working in a TV station that broadcasted a lot of American
So you're
content.
watching. So not only are you putting this stuff on, you're actually watching the stuff that you're putting on. You were
Yes,
sitting in this place all day.
I was watching a lot of things. Yes, I and I
I can
and I
imagine.
and I watched. Programming is very international in the sense that we would
Yeah,
we
yeah,
would we would buy soap operas from Venezuela and Mexico, but we would also buy anime from
yeah.
Japan,
Right,
from
right.
Korea, and we would also buy TV half
Wow.
an hour and 1 hour TV series from the US, and we would
Mhm.
also buy um, British comedy. Okay,
Oh wow.
so
It's
so
very
yeah,
multicultural. And
so it was a widespread variety of contents, and don't forget that Chile was the first free market experiment.
yeah, if you
We,
were
we,
saying
you know,
that.
we, we went into it much earlier than the US. We went into it in 1979. So Chile
Yeah,
was, and it still is, a hub economy. It's basically a place in Latin America. I mean, if you want to import export, Chile is the best place to put your company, because that would be the best place to bring things from the other continents and distribute it in Latin America, and at the same time pick up products from Latin America and distribute it to the rest of the continents.
yeah. I was not aware of how hyper capitalist Chile actually is. That was something I was not. I was in my
Oh
head.
yeah,
I think about what those Latin American socialist countries. That's probably what most
oh yeah.
people think in the U.S.
I
But
mean,
it's not that at all. It's not that at
the,
all.
the experiment designed by the Chicago School of Economy, but also by the Military School of the Americas, was pretty much the first place where it was tested was Chile. And on top of that, we were so extreme, about it, about adopting neoliberalism, that
Yeah,
the first thing that the dictatorship was very conservative economically,
yeah.
and it was totally into import substitution from 73 until 79. But on 79, the Chicago Boys finally convinced Pinochet to try the experiment, and Pinochet filled the cabinet with the Chilean economists that came from the School of Chicago. And the first thing that we did was privatize Social Security. That was the
Yes.
start. Okay,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
crazy. Man.
we
First thing, that's
went for
all in.
the heart of the
Right.
economic system
Yeah,
immediately.
that's
And
amazing.
basically, the whole economical project of Pinochet was based on the privatization of pensions, of Social Security.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
is called the how do you call in English, a beam, right? Like
Yeah,
the piece of wood
yeah.
that holds
I know
the,
what you
the
mean.
ceiling, a
Yeah,
beam.
yeah. No,
So
I know what
the
you mean.
master beam of the Chilean economical project architecturally was the privatization of the Social Security.
And it seems like it worked pretty well, right? Am I wrong to say that that was not a success, or at least a partial success? I mean, how is the safety net, the social safety net in Chile? I guess I don't know. Are there a lot of people falling through the cracks that aren't getting? Are there a lot
Oh,
of poor people?
I mean, we went exactly like the U.S., only 40 years earlier than you.
Yeah,
Meaning, for example, that we immediately had a problem with the health sector. We had
right.
private health very early on, also
Yeah,
in
yeah,
86, I think, 85.
yeah,
Okay, and so public health went down the drain. Public hospitals were abandoned. Health became very expensive. Uh, you had to have a healthcare plan. Nevertheless, it was cheaper than the U.S., but nevertheless, we had this. We had
right.
a United Healthcare, and we had six more United Healthcares, and you had to pick your plan. and
Yeah.
and on top of that, if you didn't have money, you could pay with credit cards. So pretty much the whole Chile got indebted very, very quickly
Healthcare. Yeah. Right.
to pay for
Yeah.
all of this, you know. So everyone had a credit card also, which was very peculiar. Everyone had a credit card very early on. And so, social security and health were early on privatized, and so the social safety net was early on destroyed. Earlier than you guys,
Right.
we were very parallel to Margaret Thatcher and the British conservatism. And actually, as you know, Thatcher was very good friends with Pinochet, and the British aligned with the Chileans against the Argentinians on the war for the Falkland Island also, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but Chile was very peculiar because Chile was super aligned with the UK, and Chile was super aligned with the United States, not being an English-speaking country,
It is
but
peculiar.
heavily aligned. And actually, the teaching of English also went in early on in Chile, so
I
you
did.
will find a lot of Chileans that speak good English. Yes.
And I found that when I went, I was only there one time, but yeah, I did find that there was quite a number of English speakers, very strong English speakers. But anyways, so you're in the back of the TV station. You're at the TV station. I guess you like the job. At least okay, right? You're getting promoted. You're moving. You didn't leave. You didn't leave the TV. They didn't leave the TV business. So then where's the transition to the movie part come in? To movie production and making movies.
Yeah, I mean, actually, what happened first is that I got very bored of academia. I found academia
Yeah.
nauseating
Yeah.
because we were coming out of the dictatorship, and we were beginning to face a lot of human rights issues.
Yeah.
And you know that Chile is a very paradigmatical case on human rights.
Yeah.
And we also had this very Frankensteinish state that was halfway through privatizing everything, but not really everything, but quite a bit. And we were also on the process of building an oligarchy. There was basically 6 families in Chile that owned everything, and you know, the military gave the oligarchy everything. And so these 6 families took ownership of the majority of Chile, and they built, like Mussolini, they built the basic fascist project, which is the alliance between corporation and state on the one side, and on the other side, Pinochet pretty much conceded control of the economy to these oligarchs, a little bit like Putin is doing now, and has done for the last 20 years.
Right.
So in a very bizarre way, we Chileans are sort of a lab experiment
So
of
is
what
that still the case in Chile? Do you still have these
what
6 families that are still in charge of everything, basically? That's still the
yes,
case.
yes, we still do. Yes, and yes, we do, and we did, and we still have them, and they are still the owners of the majority of everything in Chile. But what happened later on is that later on, basically, we had a Christian democracy period, basically influenced by the politics of Italy, because Italy had a strong influence both in receiving the exiles from Chile. The third biggest Chilean colony of exiles is Italy. The first one being Sweden, and the second one being Canada.
Mhm.
And but we had first a period of Christian democracy, and then we had a period of social democracy, or what you guys now call democratic socialism. We also had that. We had 10 years of social democracy, and in the period of social democracy, we began, first of all, offering public free healthcare. First of all, second of all, trying to we continued the process of privatization, but with a bigger control from the government, a bigger fiscal policy. So we didn't go like, you Americans are now obsessed with reducing everything. I mean, Doge fired 270,000 employees and destroyed half of the cabinet. Okay, that's. I mean, you really guys did it much harder than us, because you did it in like 3 months, and you pretty much destroyed your whole state. We didn't do that. Actually, we had a period in which we rebuilt the public sector of Chile, and that brought some kind of relief to the population. And the population.
But it ended, you're saying.
Population.
But it ended. But it
Yeah.
ended. And why did it end? Why did it end?
Why
If
did
it was
what?
going well.
The
That
social-
social democratic period. Yeah.
Why? Well, change of generations. The population doubled. We went from 9 million to almost 18 million. And also the population changed, and the population went from being heavily influenced by socialism and communism in the 70s and the hippie
Yeah.
movement. The hippie movement was very strong in Chile. We went drastically into a free market economy, and so we Americanized very much, and then we went into the social
Cool.
democracy period. So what you should understand is that Chileans, I consider we're sort of lab rats, and we were basically
Almost.
electrified. We were tortured. We went through
Not at all.
every
Right.
economical
Interesting.
system in less than 25 years, and so we're pretty much a shocked population in every aspect of the world. So I would say that today Chile is super confused. Chile doesn't know exactly what future to choose, and so we went from a right wing to a left wing to a right wing to a left wing government, and now the Pinochet old school got the government back for the first time in 40 years, which is very.
The Pinochet old school is back. Wow. So you've gone full circle all the way
Yeah,
back to Pinochet
exactly.
yet
We
again.
went exactly. That's very, very well put. We went full circle. So now the old Pinochet guard is back in power, and
Okay.
we made a mistake, pretty much like the mistake the U.S. has made in choosing Trump,
Yeah.
and now the presidency of Chile is held by a fool, and he really doesn't know what to
Tell us what
do.
you really think. Yeah, I understand. We know what
He's not
that's like. We would have no idea what I'd have no idea what that's like.
he's not a
But
very intelligent man, and he's doing a lot of, at any rate, this is a world problem. Politics has become less a problem of public policy and more a thing about the spectacle, the reality
and
show.
nobody in their right mind wants to go into politics, and I don't blame them
Politics,
because
politics has
you
become
get destroyed.
perception.
Yeah, you just get your ass destroyed every day for no apparent benefit, or not a whole lot of benefit, and so that none of the really intelligent or good people are going into politics, which I can't say I blame them. But in any event, back to your academia. You got sidetracked there. Academia. You thought well, you didn't want to go into. You decided not to go into academia, which would have made the most sense to be a philosophy degree,
I mean,
polymath. You have a lot of
you
skills
know,
there.
even before everything that is happening now with the AI, already there was an anti-intellectual stance in Chile. Like
Yeah,
intellectuals and artists are all lefties, and they're all good for nothings, and they bring nothing to the economy, and they do not increase the
yeah,
domestic internal product, and so there was already a stigma
yeah,
against artists and intellectuals. So it wasn't very comfortable to be an intellectual. Not that, I mean, there was free speech. We could do and say whatever we wanted. We were
yeah,
just in a state of irrelevance, and so
yeah,
academy felt very relevant, especially considering everything that was happening. Actually, we finally took over about the problems of human rights, but we took care of it very late, like 15 years later, after we got rid of Pinochet finally. And so we were very late on that. We didn't have a Nuremberg like the Italians, and that also impacted very much the way we never overcame the dictatorship. We never really took care of it the way we should have. The transition to get rid of Pinochet was a negotiated thing. And I thought that politically, all of that was super interesting. And in terms of language and media, it was very interesting. And academy,
yeah,
was teaching, we were studying Aristotle and Plato and St. Thomas Aquinas. And,
yeah.
I went into the university that was the most contemporary one, and I was lucky in that because I could reach existentialism and post-structuralism and logical positivism, and in that aspect I had a very complete study of the history of philosophy, but I was in a country that paid no attention to it. So I got bored of academia and I abandoned academia. And so I decided to stay in the world of television, and I kept working as an employee there for many years, and I continued working in programming, and I also worked in censorship, which was very peculiar.
Yeah, that's interesting. I
we,
didn't know
we,
that. You were a censor. You were actually a censor.
I was a censor, yes. I got to re-edit some of the American material and decided that some things had to go depending on what the law said. Okay, this is a large chapter, but it was what is important to understand is that very early on I was exposed to philosophy, to politics, and to media, and on top of
Right,
that, I had a job that had to do with what
right.
do we show the Chileans and what we do not show, what do we buy and what we do not buy, and then when
And
we bought
you're
something,
so,
what do we cut out, and what do we
right.
leave.
But
So
you're a kid, so you're just a kid. You're just a kid. You're making these
yes,
decisions for the whole country about what they can and can't see,
yes,
basically. And you were
Yes,
allowed. You had the power. It was you making the decision. You were empowered to make. Or you was a
I,
group of people. Or
I,
what?
I was very young. I was the assistant to the manager of programming, but
Right.
I was exposed. I was 19 to
Right.
21. Yes, but but there was something about the industrial spirit of my father that remained with me, and I found fascinating to work in
Yeah.
the media industry, especially for the speed and the collaborative process about it, and I got entangled into it very much. And so I continued working for 4 years in television until I got tired of the mediocrity, I would say, because
Yeah.
at that time, we were slowly Chile evolved from, just like it happened with agricultural products, we went in from import substitution into national programming. And so the programming of national content grew. Subsidies
Yeah.
began to show up for the production of television and for the production of cinema. And so
Something about
independent cinema and television production appeared. Little companies began to grow. And so
yeah.
you could produce content without working on a TV station. And so I found
Yeah.
that attractive. And also I got tired of living in a very big city. Santiago was
Yeah.
4 million people, and it was very highly polluted, like
Really.
Ciudad de Mexico or Tokyo.
Really. That's what.
Highly
Really.
highly polluted city. Yeah, it's a valley surrounded by
Yeah. It is
mountains.
about. It's gorgeous. Yeah. Yeah.
And we basically ruined also the Central Valley because we industrialized the Central Valley instead of building the industries
Yeah.
on the outskirts like the Scandinavians do. And so I moved to the south of Chile. I moved to Valdivia, which was a 100,000 people city, a small
Yeah.
city, although standard city for Germany, and it actually was an old German colony. And so
Yeah.
I moved to Valdivia, and in Valdivia I decided to found my own film production company, and I went
And
into
how old were you? How old were you? How old were you at this time when you founded the company?
this is 2001, so I was 24.
24. Wow. So you founded a company at age 24. Which is about the
Yes,
time to do it. You graduated, and the charter of the company was what? What did you want to do with the company? What was your objective with the company?
I wanted to do independent cinema, and
Cinema. So
yes,
you
I
said
wanted.
TV. You don't want to do TV anymore. You actually wanted to do movies.
No, no, I focused on cinema. I really wanted to do movies,
Okay.
and there's many reasons for it. First of
Yeah.
all, during the academic years, I did a lot of film studies. I
Yeah.
was
Okay.
also a film buff. I watched
Okay.
endless movies in the theaters, and then when I worked in television, I bought a lot of films for exhibition for broadcasting in television. So I was a film buff, and I had already watched a lot of movies, and I
Yeah.
I thought, I'm among the cultural products of audio. You can divide the audiovisual world in three, which is advertisement and propaganda, journalism, and cinema.
Yeah.
And I found cinema more attractive than journalism or advertisement
Yeah.
as an industrial production
And
because
but you wanted it because you wanted a message, right? You wanted to say something. I mean, because I guess cinema is
of course
interesting in that way.
of
You
course
can
I
say
was
something.
something. Yeah.
But what did you want to say? It's like my question. What was it? Did you have in your mind like what you wanted your message to be, or you didn't really know?
I mean, this is the part in which, unfortunately, my father died the same year that I moved to Valdivia, so he never saw this period of me. But this is the period in which I became an industrialist like him, only on the field of cinema.
Yeah.
And I never directed, and I never wrote any script. I basically was the person that would look for talent, and I would basically look for directors and look for scripts and bring the whole thing together. And so I became a producer, and not only the owner of the company, but the producer of the films. And the producer, technically speaking, is the person that is legally and financially responsible for the whole project, and
Yeah.
also the rights holder, the owner of the film rights, also. So I found all of this fascinating, and I became my father finally, and
Yeah.
I began, collecting, doing financing, collecting a lot of money, and looking for directors and looking for scripts and bringing the whole thing together, and then hiring between 40 and 100 people for each project, and each
Yeah.
movie would take 18 months, and
Yeah.
so in
So
that in that
where do you get the
era.
money? So you finding financing. Where is this coming from? Are these private investors or is this government money? Is it a mix?
No, there was no instance for private investment at that time. As I
It was
told
not.
you,
Okay.
there was
Okay.
a heavy anti-intellectual movement. No, the majority of the money came from subsidies,
So movies were viewed as intellectual. So the movies, the cinema was used as an intellectual, artistic pursuit, not, because in the U.S. the movies are sort of like the everyman. There is the artistic part of it, but there's also the
Well,
everyman. Everyone likes the movies, kind of thing.
I no, I disagree with you in that aspect, in the sense that American cinema had this. American cinema has had a very peculiar evolution, in the sense that American cinema started with silent films,
Yeah,
and basically they imported the British model. And when the talkies arrived, I mean, excuse me, they imported the British model. Chaplin was British, and in the early silent period, there was this moment in which Charlie Chaplin and Douglas Fairbanks and Jr. and
making that.
Tex Avery, and I'm missing one, a
Your
woman.
memory is outstanding, man. Your
Uh,
memory is outstanding. Anyways,
uh,
the details don't necessarily matter, but we just repeat.
there was this moment in which the actors, directors who were, employees of the companies,
Yeah,
decided to get independent, and they built what was called at that moment United Artists.
right.
And
Yeah, that is okay.
United Artists was, in its origin, in the 1905, 1910, was basically an independent company built by Chaplin and Douglas Fairbanks, and two more people, Mary
Yeah,
Pickford. That's the one that was this, Mary Pickford. And, they got together and they decided to build an independent company. And so there was this first period of independence in the United States. And I would say that that period is very similar to the period that we were living,
in
only with
Chile.
the difference that American cinema has always depended on revenue, on box office, whereas we had public subsidies, which America never had.
And but you
So
did. So you did not have a box. So you did. There's the films that you would make. There were not theaters to show them in Chile. We're
no,
saying.
no, 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 no,
No.
no. Get me wrong. No, no, no. This is what I'm telling you, that besides being an intellectual and an academic and all that, I was an industrialist, and I made every film. Every film I did was released in theaters, and I attempted box office all the time. And I had very meager results in general. My films didn't exploit that much, but nevertheless, box office was the main source of income. So we fought. It's just that by the 1980s, and thanks to Reagan, there was this other period of indie cinema in the United States, which is from Easy Rider,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Roger Corman, this very
Yeah.
famous film producer that he pretty much made the career of every film starting on 65. Roger Corman also was sort of a Douglas Fairbanks, Charlie Chaplin model, but Corman was even cheaper, because Corman, would find ways in which to recycle sets or shoot on location.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
abandoned the
Yeah.
studio concept, and he recycled everything, and he made very, very cheap movies. And also, this is the period in which in America, auto cinemas are everywhere, and men are driving their girls in their cars to go and watch a
Yes.
movie, and so
Yeah.
the combination of indie cinema shot on location, beginning with Corman and continuing into the 80s with directors like Gus Van Sant or Amos Poe, or the Mails brothers, or Frederick Wiseman in the documentary field. There was a movement, an intellectual movement in American cinema that was very, very important, and we could even include Alfred Hitchcock, because Hitchcock was also a
Yeah.
very peculiar director, with half a foot in the studios, but also half a foot in the independent market. And Psycho, which is Psycho is from 1960, and
Yeah.
Psycho is the first movie of the slasher genre. Hitchcock
Yeah.
is the father
Yeah.
of the slasher.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be Friday the 13th or
Yeah.
Nightmare
Yeah.
on Elm Street if it wasn't for the Hitchcock. And Hitchcock, wanted to do this movie, and the studios told him to fuck off. To no, they no,
Yeah.
we're not gonna do a movie which we kill the star on the first
Yeah.
30
Yeah.
minutes. We're not gonna show bodies
Yeah.
being killed with knives. No, the studio was totally against it. So Hitchcock did sort of a crowdfunding. He raised independent money, and he raised a very little amount, like for that time, like $2 million, and he made Psycho. And Psycho is one of the first indie films of the
So,
United States.
so speaking of money, so what did one of your films cost? What is a film of the type that yours are all shot on location, right? You don't have yours are not studio. There's no studio aspect to the movies you've made, or is there?
We First of all, we never had studios.
No studios. There's no option.
No, there were no studios in Chile, no
Okay.
film studios. No, because we never had a period of the, you guys had the period of the studios, Metro Goldwyn Mayer and
Yeah.
Paramount
Right.
and
Yeah.
Universal,
Yeah.
this, the MPA, the Motion
Yeah.
Picture Association. We never had that because we never had a period of studios. The only countries that had a little moment of studio was Argentina and Mexico, but not us. So
Okay.
so first of all, everything we did was indie. Everything, all movies were all indie. Even the ones that tried to be commercial were also indie. And in the period I did movies, we would make a movie for $500,000, $350,000,
Three
and
hundred
that.
fifty thousand. Okay. And,
And
and and that would be that. So in the at that time in the U.S. that would be unheard of. That be you got to help me with the scale here. What would a movie of a block a
no,
more standard movie?
it depends, because I mean, no, I wouldn't say that. It's just that
No.
America makes everything more expensive than it should
You gotta
be,
say, yeah.
in general terms, because America, installed this
Yes, they
idea.
do. Yes.
America installed
The
this
more
idea.
expensive, better.
The economy is based on growth, and growth is
Yeah.
based on consumerism, and so
Yeah.
America needs
Bigger is
people to
better.
buy stuff, and everyone needs to buy a lot of stuff to make America work.
Yes.
So things were much more, and also technicians and actors were unionized very early on
Right. Right. Yeah.
due to the studio system, and the higher cost in any movie, and the higher cost in an American movie, is the salary of stars,
Yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
what is called the star system, basically. Okay, so
Yeah.
we didn't have that either. Actors had the same salary than a technician over here. So,
Really.
so
So the stars of your movies are making the same as the cameramen or the people filming the movie.
yes, of
Basically.
course, yes, and
Oh,
sometimes
okay.
less.
That's
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes
absolutely.
that's
But
that
but
that
but
is
this, but
really
you
funny.
have you have to understand that this also happened in the United States, from the
Yeah.
movie of Roger Corman in the 60s and 70s,
Yeah.
to Amos Poe and Gus Van Sant in the 80s, to
Yeah.
finally, I would say that the last indie was probably John Hughes, the guy who made The Breakfast Club and Pretty in Pink. He was probably, and John Landis were
Yeah.
probably they still had they still, because then America created the sub studio, which were the independent studios, like
Yeah. Yeah.
Touchstone's Pictures, or I don't know. There were many
Yeah.
sub studios. Sub studios would get a little bit of private funding, and a little bit of funding from one studio, and a little bit of funding from the pocket of the producer, and they would come up with things. But nevertheless, what I wanted to tell you is that nevertheless there are some experiments that are very successful in the United States with budgets like ours. For example,
Yeah.
a
Right.
very good excellent is an excellent example is Napoleon Dynamite. I don't know if you've seen this movie. But
Mm.
Napoleon Dynamite was actually a film shot in Idaho by a director that came from Idaho, and who decided to go back to his little town in Idaho. And he shot the movie there, and he shot it with all the people from his little town that he knew from when he was young, so nobody got paid. And,
Nobody got
and
paid.
no, but
Yeah.
the movie was a
Yeah.
huge commercial success in the United States, and it sort of opened
Yeah.
the door to what could an indie film be.
Yeah.
Also, the first movies by Gus Van Sant are important, like Mala Noche, which is a jewel in Indie American cinema, shot on Super 16, black and white. Also, the first movies by Hal Ashby, Easy Rider is also
Yeah.
very,
Yeah.
and it was
Yeah.
also shot with nothing, very cheap,
Yeah.
and it kickstarted the career of Peter Fonda and Jack Nicholson and Dennis Hopper. So this thing about budgets is very tricky. I would say that in
Yeah.
general, America has always inflated budgets too much, and on top of that, as I was telling you, Reagan, America had FDR as part of the New Deal, forced forced the economy to divide production from distribution. So if you had a company that produced anything, you couldn't also have the company that distributed that.
Yeah.
That was part
Yeah.
of the New Deal in America.
Yeah.
And that lasted until Reagan. Reagan finally allowed vertical integration. And so quickly, the majors regained their power. And so indie film went down the drain. And now the majors also control distribution in the States. And so they began buying
So
theaters.
you remember, you remember there was this move to sort of in the independent film world in the U.S. to ultra violence. With Tarantino, that there was a lot of these like the ultra violent, you know, indie movies. And did Chile see that same sort of thing, that same trend, or was that really an America phenomenon?
The violent film? You
Yeah,
mean
the
like
ultra, like your
you mean like,
Tarantino, your Pulp Fiction, those kinds of movies where
I mean, sorry to tell you, this genre existed in the States before Tarantino. Tarantino
yeah,
simply,
yeah, of course,
Tarantino, as you know, worked on a video store, and so he watched endless VHS tapes of endless films. And
yeah,
Tarantino got to know very well a genre that was also an indie genre in the States in the 50s that was called exploitation movies. Okay,
yes,
which are a little bit of detective story, a little bit of police story, a little bit of murder story, a little bit of thriller. What in the state is called pulp,
yeah,
which is the origin of the name Pulp Fiction. So just to make a halt to that to you, Tarantino basically recycled the genre of exploitation movies and sexploitation movies and black exploitation movies of
yeah,
the 50s, and he recycled it and he brought it back with Reservoir Dogs
yeah.
and Pulp Fiction. But yes, of course, we did a lot of movies on the style of Reservoir Dogs, and there
You did.
were attempting to do it. Yes,
Did you do any movies of that in that style or no?
no, I didn't.
Okay. I should know some of your movies. I've not seen this. I have to say, I've not
I,
seen any of your movies. I probably should at least watch one of them. You
I
have
did.
worked with some stars that people would recognize. Rucker Hauer, you have worked with,
Yes, I did.
I understand.
But I mean, at the beginning, I did fantasy, and I did a couple of exploitation movies. Yes,
You did. Okay.
I did a
Okay.
murder mystery movie that was based in a real murder that happened in the village that I lived in, Valdivia.
Okay. Okay.
And so I did try, but to explain this to you, basically, it's true that in the end, you cannot make a competitive film with 500,000. You need to raise more
Yeah.
money. You need to go
Right.
for a bigger budget. If you want a
Yeah.
star or if you want a market that is one outside your own, you have to do a movie in English and you have to do a movie with international stars. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you will remain doing museum artifacts. Like really, really independent films, which is the case also
Super
of
independent.
which is the case of independent cinema in the U.S. It's just that
Well,
I have a special consideration for what Chaplin did, and also for black exploitation, sexploitation, and exploitation movies, and also I have a heart for the Mail Brothers and Amos Poe and Gus Van Sant, and I have a heart for that because America had a period of intellectual movies, okay,
yeah. Yeah.
which unfortunately Americans have forgotten, and they have done themselves a disservice. But in general, America is very amnesiac. You have also
Well,
forgotten
anti-intellectual, and at the moment,
forgotten
anti-intellectual
your
big time.
history, and you've also forgotten your philosophical movements, and you've also forgotten your own
Many
tradition.
things. Yes, we forgot many things. Many
But
things. We
that
go on
doesn't
and on how we
that
forgot.
doesn't mean that America
Very
didn't
true.
have them. America did have an intellectual movement, and
Oh, for sure.
in
Absolutely.
many
Yeah.
different
Still does.
fields.
It still does.
American transcendentalism. Like Thoreau and
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Frederick Douglass and
Yeah.
Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it would be vital for you Americans to reread Emerson, Douglass,
Yeah.
and Thoreau now. Because
Yeah, it's never gonna happen. No one would
every
read. They can read
politically
anything. It's going to read anything. It's gonna be
no
it's
one
gonna be a
knows
challenge.
Emerson and Thoreau.
But no,
And
I
then
hear you, man. You're so right about that. But so the back to the big star question. So the biggest movie you ever made? Let's say not biggest. What the right word is here? Most popular? I don't know what the right word is.
before
The
before we
most
get
recognized. What would it be? In your
before we
your
get, before we get to that, let me explain to you a
uh,
little bit how we began to grow out of our market,
sure. All right.
why we began thinking about exporting,
Okay. Yeah.
in Chile, but showing it elsewhere.
Yeah.
And basically, what happened, starting in the decade of the 2000s, or maybe a little bit earlier, in 1999, 1998, okay, Europe was facing a very similar problem, only that the tradition of European cinema was highly intellectual, and Europeans had managed to put intellectual films in theaters and have good box office returns. In that aspect, Europe is very unique, and France is unique in the world in that aspect. Because France also has 4,000 theaters like the United States, even though
Does it really?
even though France is 80 million and the United
Right.
States is 320 million, 330.
Right. Right. Huh.
Mexico,
Same number of
Mexico,
theaters. Boy, huh.
Mexico, India, the United States, and France are the only countries that have 4,000 theaters. Okay, so they are
Amazing.
really the markets. And
Yeah.
so you do a film, you're thinking about
Those markets.
distributing in France, in Mexico, in the United States, or in India. And that's where you
Yeah.
would make a lot of money. And so
Right.
what happened is that the European market also began to offer subsidies like we did in Latin America. So there was this parallelism in which there was a lot of public money available for films in Europe and in Latin America. And so we went into the structure of international co-productions. We began partnering, for example, a producer from Chile with a producer from Argentina with a producer from France.
Yeah.
Okay, so the three producers, we would bring money from our three countries, and we would build a bigger budget. Now a 1 million, 1.2 million, no more than
Yeah.
that, maybe 1.5 max. Max 1.5 million. Okay, which for us was a lot, and it was very
Yeah.
difficult. It was very difficult to recoup. But at the same time, the majority of it was non-refundable subsidies, so we could take the risk because we didn't have to pay it back, or we didn't have to pay
Yeah.
back
It's just
all of
big.
it.
Yeah. Understood. And the
Nevertheless,
idea was to distribute the risk and also distribute the money making across the multiple countries where you
yes,
could sell them.
and also grow in territory. Because if
Yeah.
we got money from these three countries, then we would distribute the film in these three countries.
Yeah.
And so after my fourth film, I began doing only co-productions. And I did co-productions with many countries. I co-produced with Argentina, with Costa Rica, with Guatemala, with Uruguay. I co-produced also here in Europe, I co-produced with Germany, with France and Italy. And look, Luxembourg. I even did a co-production with Luxembourg.
Luxembourg had a film industry. Who knew Luxembourg had a
So,
film industry?
so the cocktail got very weird, and if you were very creative,
Right.
you could go. In one case you asked me about the biggest film. I mean,
Yeah.
the biggest film budget wise was a film I did, which was called Il Futuro, and it was
Yes.
a film co-produced by 5 countries, and it was
Yes.
a legal financial night.
I can only imagine. That's right. I did a little research on the Il Futuro for sure. I want to see the movie. I really do want to see the movie, but it sounds like it was just a really difficult film to deal with.
The only way would be for me to. I mean, yeah, because you're in Mexico. Yeah, I would need to send you a link, or maybe we will talk about this because I still own the rights, which is interesting.
You're still on the rights. Okay, you'll still own the rights to it. Oh,
I own the rights to this is a part interesting to talk about the thing about rights. But let's finish with this. So the biggest film I did was $1.5 million, and it had
what year?
It had Rutger
What year?
Hauer.
What year? What year was that? Do you recall?
It was shot in, when did we shoot it? 2011.
2011. Okay. All right. Not
2011.
that long ago. Well, 20 years ago. Pretty long. Fairly long ago now. It feels like yesterday, but
Feels like yesterday. To me, it feels like a century ago.
yeah, that's right. 2011. Okay.
So many things have changed,
Of course, yes.
Particularly the issue of ownership. Who owns the film?
Yes, right.
That has changed dramatically because in the films, we had to fight for financing, and we had to fight for the distribution, and we had to do everything in 3 languages, from the contracts to the soundtrack.
Wow. Yeah,
everything was complicated, but at the very end, we owned the rights, and that has completely changed.
We say we, that's you, all the producers, yourself and your co-producers.
The indie producers, yes. We own the rights, not the government, not the broadcasters, not the private investors. We the producers, people, with flesh and blood, we owned the rights, and that
will do. In perpetuity. That's in perpetuity. Right? No one, you own them in perpetuity until the end of time.
You own them in perpetuity, but the in perpetuity doesn't exist outside the United States.
I see. It does not.
In Latin America, and above all in Europe, there is a tradition of respect to author rights, to droit d'auteur. So the producer is one of the authors of the film, but so is the script writer, and so is the director. And so what we do is that we own the rights for a period, which is usually 50 years. Okay, usually.
Yeah.
It varies depending on the legislation of the country. But basically, we follow the rule that eventually there is a moment in which the rights go back to the authors, and then eventually the rights go back to public domain.
And just public domain, just like a patent.
Eventually, for every work of art done in Europe or Latin America, things go back to public domain. Whereas, so this tradition of ownership of culture, of cultural products, is totally different to the tradition of copyright from the United States.
Yeah, right.
Where you have things like on perpetuity, But to be honest, even in the case of the United States, there is a limit. There is a
Yeah,
limit.
yeah, yeah.
That limit, I mean, in the sense that even in the United States, things go into public domain. Okay,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
for many many years, the American legislation established 75 years of ownership. Okay, after the death of the authors.
Oh,
So and then Sonny Bono, the former husband of Cher and
yes.
former TV
I don't,
host,
I don't know what else he did.
he's dead. But Sonny Bono went into politics and he went into the House of Representatives. And Sonny Bono modified the legislation and he made an extension of rights. And he extended rights to 95 years after the death of the author. So this goes scaling. So if you count, in general terms, now in the United States, films that were done before 1932 or 1933, they all go into public domain. And so next year, all films in 1934 go into public domain. And then in
Yeah.
the next year, all
Yeah.
films.
How many films were there in 1934? I don't know if there were all that many, but
So
that's
eventually,
good enough.
slowly, unfortunately, I find disastrous this thing that Sonny Bono did, because
Yeah, and it's yeah,
I think, for example, I think that the day the Beatles become public domain, the world will be a better place, I think.
yeah. No, I
And,
hear you. I hear you.
and the day,
Totally.
the day that old classics from the 50s become public domain, and in general, as slowly as it goes, the more we grow in public domain, the better it is for the audience because they have free access to the movies. Now the
Yeah,
problem
yeah.
is that in the case of the United States, it would be great, for example, for the United States to have a shorter period so that everything becomes public domain. If I were a politician in the United States, I would basically fight for a quicker public domain because public domain is the alternative to education, and you guys have pretty much destroyed your educational system.
That's a really interesting. That's a really interesting thought. No one, I don't, as far as I know, no one has ever campaigned on that issue because it's seems like such a nano issue, but it really has a lot of implications for a lot of different things, and it's a really interesting way to run. If you're a politician out there, go ahead, campaign on that. See how you do, because I think that's a fantastic idea. So we've got 3 minutes left, man. Dude, we barely even got started. We didn't even get to your political career. We're only still in the filmmaking. we got,
You
this guy
also
worked for the president. The
you
guy worked
also
for the president of Chile. We haven't got there yet. Not even close.
how many minutes do we have?
3 minutes. We're gonna have to do a follow up because we're nowhere near.
My political period is the period I hate the most, so we can talk.
But
What is
it's also
relevant?
fascinating. It's
What is
fascinating though
relevant?
because you were really way high up in the regime there. I mean, you worked for the president of Chile
Yeah, no,
and had some high ranking ministers. I
excuse
mean, this is
me.
serious.
First of all, I worked in a democratic government, not a regime.
Okay.
Okay,
Well, as I understand.
you have a regime in the States. We have a
Yeah.
democratic.
All right. Okay. All right.
Sorry.
I guess there is that. So it wasn't all maybe that important, but
No,
still
the first
pretty
the
interesting.
first thing is that while I built my company and while I did more and more films and my films grew in size and grew in audiences and then my films got selected in festivals and I traveled a lot. Blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah.
that's
At the same time,
Sundance, Cannes. This is the other part we didn't get to. You're at Sundance. You're at Cannes. You're at all these major film festivals with your
yes,
films, and we didn't get
yes.
to talk about that. I'm sure that was a lot of fun. I can only imagine how much fun that must have been. But unfortunately, we don't have time to cover that part either.
Well,
But we're going to do a follow up for sure.
the film that we're talking about, Il Futuro, the one with Ratchet
Yeah,
Howard,
definitely.
it got
Yeah.
selected into the world competition section of Sundance, and it got a little distribution in the States. So it might be a film that could be found in the States. We still have a sales
Yeah.
agent over there that sells it, visit films. And it's the only film I could put into the American market because, contrary to what one would expect, the American market is very close. But nevertheless, let's go to the
Really,
political.
it's closed. So it's closed. How's it closed? In the sense of what do you mean by it's closed? The market is closed to film.
In the sense that because of the vertical integration allowed by Reagan, the majors not only own
Yeah.
the movies, but they also own the distribution channels in the theaters, and
I
so
see.
they control the screens, and therefore they have
Yeah.
no desire to have any kind of movies outside
Yeah.
their own. And
But-
this is also a cultural problem for the States because
Yeah.
in general terms, there's around 1,000 movies made every year in the world. And of those, around 175 are made in the United States only. There's 800 movies that are done elsewhere, okay? And these 800 movies do not get into the American market. and
No.
that includes France, and that includes Europe, and that includes Asia, and that many of
Yeah.
these films, many films never get into the American market,
And
which
even
is a
in the video market, even in the not the screens, but just the post screen, not even the Netflix
the,
kind of like that's what.
the video market is gone. In
Yeah.
the
Well,
the video
you know
market
what I
is
mean.
doesn't exist any longer. VHS and
Yeah. Yeah.
DVD are dead. They
Well,
don't
I
exist.
mean, what I mean is the non-screen distribution channel for
Okay,
movies.
then we need to talk a little bit more about film
I
industry
know.
before we
And
go
you've
on.
been through, you got the whole transition you went through from the late,
I
I
mean,
mean, from the films from
just to make
19 millimeter to digital to laser disc, I mean DVD. You lived through that whole media revolution.
yes, I
And
went.
I
Yes,
would love to talk about that too.
I
But
went from
we're
30. I
also
went from 35 to the. I went from 35 millimeter to the
that's
file.
right, correct. That's so that's gonna be part 8 of our discussion when we because we're out of time. Instead whatever. It's been an hour, and I hate to take these longer than an hour because people already start losing their patience at an hour. But so I'm gonna end it there. But Bruno, we're gonna have you back. I guarantee it. I have to because we didn't get hardly anywhere as far as not even a quarter of your life down here. So but I'm glad. I'm so happy. And this is your coming out. This is your coming back to the for public screen. I guess you've not been in a public setting, I guess, like this in a very long time. Is that correct? Like in a
I retired from everything around 7 years ago, and I
from
went to live
everything.
from everything. I went to live in. I mean, I tried. COVID retired me
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I decided to open a branch of my company in Germany, and I went to Berlin, and I opened an office, 2 months before the declaration of the pandemic, and that
yeah,
pretty much was the beginning of the end. I
yeah,
suffered an early retirement, and not only me, but while this was happening, precisely the issue about ownership, who owns the rights and
yeah,
who makes the films, began to change. And now the films that you see on Netflix, they're all films owned by Netflix. There are no independent
yeah.
producers there.
Huh.
Barely.
And,
Netflix rare for a period. Netflix would buy independent movies, but Netflix quickly
not anymore.
abandoned that and began self-producing things. And that is why also, if you have a taste for films, everything you see in Netflix is a little bit similar, and that's why many people waste a lot of time looking for the movie they want to see before
Which
choosing
is,
it.
yeah,
Because
you're right. You're right about that.
everything
You're right
looks a
about
little bit alike.
it. But you sort of in hiding, if you will, not in hiding necessarily, but you moved back to Italy actually. You are no
Yeah.
longer in Chile. You're in Italy now, in a very small town. Like I mean, I kid you not, a town, a village. It's got one street.
Well,
You're in the middle of no.
we all suffered COVID in a different manner, and Germany
Yeah,
had
yeah,
Germany had its perks and Germany had its disasters.
yeah.
And
Right.
it was a very traumatic period in general terms. Nobody could move.
Yeah,
COVID killed
yeah.
cinema in the sense that people stopped going to cinemas because it
Right.
wasn't allowed, and people also couldn't, join a crew and shoot a movie because it was also not allowed. So
Yeah,
in these 2 years, even there was a crisis on the theaters. There still is. The majority of theaters in Europe have closed, and also even the festivals. The festival circuit had a crisis. Nobody could go to the festival, and we tried online
yeah. Right.
festivals. It was a
Yeah, it doesn't
disaster.
work. Yeah,
And then
yeah.
Netflix came in and took over the whole sector. So
Right.
cinema, the way we conceived it, does no longer exist. It's a dead art form.
Well, maybe you need to bring it back. That's what I'm thinking here. It's
So
time to come out. It's time to come out. This is your coming out party. Welcome to you. There's like 5 people here that have listened to us, or thanks for joining everybody who did join. There's some names I recognize and a few I don't, and I really appreciate you joining because it was been a fan. As usual, every time I talk to this guy, I learn something new, and I just am absolutely fascinated. And I really would love to see see you get back into the movie industry or whatever you're gonna get back into because the guy's got so many talents in so many different directions. We're gonna have you on again because we only got just barely started into your career and life, and there's so many more interesting things to talk about. But I'm gonna stop it there and say thanks everybody. And I'm going to cut this off, and Bruno will catch up at some point afterwards. I'm sure. Thanks for
you
your time.
gave me some ideas for some articles. So
Uh,
we will
yes, yes.
communicate.
So that's the other thing. The man is a writer. The man is a very talented writer, by the way. Just in case you were wondering why he's on Substack, the dude can write. I mean, he seriously can write. I kid you not. So he can be a writer if he wants to be, whatever he wants to do. I mean, obviously, the guy can do so. All right, Bruno, we'll be in touch. Thanks, man. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. All right, bye.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. How do I hang this thing up? Let's see. Good question. I can't see it.